the brain and the mind are trainable. Happiness is not an unalterable factory setting. It's a skill that you can train. And just as anxiety and anger are really contagious, so is calm, well-being, empathy, compassion. You can be a node of sanity in an insane world, and that's hope.
That's Dan Harris, author of the book 10% Happier. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Stay tuned to hear Dan's transformational journey from war reporter to meditation advocate, and how you can use mindfulness and meditation as a tool to tame your negative inner voice and cultivate hope. And a quick reminder before we get started. I shared at the beginning of the month that Everyday Better is going to be taking a pause while I go on maternity leave to give birth to my second child. So our last full episode will be next week. And just so you know, this is by no means the end of my work. If you are a LinkedIn Premium subscriber, fantastic. You'll see me interviewing, coaching, hosting workshops, and much more. So you can find me there. And if not, all is not lost. I will be sharing a lot more of my own journey and what I'm thinking about these days and continuing in this work on Substack and on Instagram. And you can search my handle, it's Leah Smart. And I hope to return this show back to you by the beginning of next year, so stay tuned. Lastly, I've got a favor to ask. If you've listened to this show and never left a review on Apple or Spotify, please do it before we go on hiatus. We'd love to know what's been most impactful for you about our show or certain episodes. And if you're new here, be sure to follow Everyday Better so you know when we come off of hiatus. All right, that's it from me. We'll be right back with today's guest, Dan Harris. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, this is Everyday Better, a show about the tools you need to create positive change in your mindset, your work, and every other area of your life. I'm Leah Smart, LinkedIn senior editor and a certified professional coach, and I help people become better versions of themselves one day at a time. And every week, I sit down with a trusted voice, so together, we can explore how to take small steps toward big changes, the kind we plan for, strive toward, or never saw coming. This month, we've focused on this idea of irrational hope, the belief that things can get better despite any and all evidence to the contrary, and hope being something we can learn and cultivate for ourselves in a pretty practical way. So today, in the final episode of this series on irrational hope, I got to sit down with Dan Harris. He is a mindfulness advocate and teacher, and he's the author of the best-selling book and the podcast, 10% Happier. Now, I personally started my own mindfulness practice back in 2015. It started pretty slow, and I gotta be honest, I dragged myself to a weekly meditation class because of peer pressure. But within a couple of months, I did start to notice some changes. There were changes to my mood, to my ability to choose my response to things instead of reacting on autopilot, the depth in which I started to view the world, the perspectives, the empathy shifted. And my path as a meditator since has unfolded in a really cool way. I'll say it just continues to be this exploration of self and others, even when I'm not showing up daily or weekly, like now as a new mom. But Dan has a much crazier story because today he hosts a super popular podcast about self-awareness and self-improvement. He runs guided meditations, he writes about the practice, and he leads meditation retreats. But 20 years ago, Dan was a TV reporter for ABC News in war zones. He was a true skeptic who has turned believer when it comes to meditation and mindfulness. And in this conversation, we get into his journey and how you can use this as a tool to tame and even befriend that nasty negative inner voice in your head. And how you can then use meditation and mindfulness to generate love and compassion for yourself and then for the world. Here's Dan. Talk to me about how you got here.
So right out of college, I started working in television, which I thought would be a cool job. It was much less glamorous than I thought it was going to be. I was working in local news in, Maine and then
Nice,
Boston.
yeah.
And then in the year 2000, I arrived at ABC News. I was 28 years old, really ambitious and excited. And that was a little bit more glamorous. And then shortly after I got there, 9/11 happened. And so I ended up spending a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, like really hot zones. And that was really exciting and also very important. It was also psychologically destabilizing in many ways that I didn't really know how to wrestle with as a, reasonably young person. And I coped with it in very unwise ways, including self-medicating with recreational drugs like cocaine. And that all led to a panic attack on Good Morning America, a major American news broadcast in 2004, in front of 5.019 million
but
people.
Who's counting?
Yeah, exactly. So that was horrible. And if you Google panic attack on live television, it's the number one result, which is, I got that going for me.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
I should list that on my LinkedIn profile. That's one of my major career achievements. So that it was a low moment, but also the beginning of a new chapter in my life, because it was as a result of having that panic attack that I first went into therapy and then ultimately found meditation.
Okay, so if you take me back to the war zones moment, were you going into this going, oh my God, this is amazing. Who knew I'd get to do this? Were you going into this going, what am I about to get myself into? And then what happens when you get there?
I would have been better off if the second set of questions were salient in my mind. I didn't have any, I was so excited and ambitious, and I also felt like it was really important work, so it was idealistic too. I was so all of those things and not cautious enough. And, and that was how I ended up getting myself into trouble.
How did you know? Like, was there a certain turning point where you were like, I'm not handling this well? Or it
was the panic attack.
That was
That was it.
What is that moment like to know that that's happening to you and know how many people are watching and not necessarily have control? Because I've had panic attacks. If you don't know what to do and you don't know what's happening, it's terrifying.
Yeah. I actually knew what was happening because it wasn't my first panic attack in my life, but that didn't help.
Yeah.
It probably made it worse because the inner dialogue is like, dude, you're panicking.
It's happening
on national television.
Right.
Everybody's seeing this. Your career is going to be over. So I was real pit of despair type of stuff, real humiliation. And then I wasn't high when I was having the panic attacks.
Yeah.
So I didn't really put two and two together until I went to go see a doctor and he put it together. That was probably the low point.
Yeah.
Not only worrying about what this was going to mean for my career and feeling really embarrassed, but then knowing there was a self-inflicted wound, what just tripled the embarrassment. That was tough.
I'm doing this to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was happening between the 2005 panic attack and the book?
Well, first, there were several years of, just no real discernible progress other than stopping using drugs and seeing a therapist. What was happening concurrently that took a little while to flower was that my boss at the time, who was a major American journalist, actually he was Canadian, but he was a major American figure, Peter Jennings, he had assigned me to cover faith and spirituality at ABC News. And I did not want to do that. I was raised in the People's Republic of Massachusetts, and my parents are both atheist scientists, so I had no interest in this. I sometimes joke that I had a bar mitzvah, but only for money. So like I was not spiritual at all.
I love that. Yes.
Totally true story.
Yeah.
So I was on this beat in this interim period. And as a result of covering faith and spirituality, I kind of got interested in self-help. And I was pretty disappointed by what I was finding in the self-help area. Not everybody's a charlatan, but there are a lot of people telling you that you can solve all of your problems through the power of positive thinking, and that's just not true.
Right.
In this zone, I stumbled upon an author named Eckhart Tolle, and he has this argument about he calls it the ego, but you could also call it the voice in the head. That we all have this nonstop inner conversation that we're mostly unaware of. And that unawareness means that our ego or the voices in our head are kind of just owning us. We're following our thoughts as if they're little dictators. And there's no self-awareness there. And so when I read Tolle's book, that really changed things for me. And I interviewed Tolle, and I was frustrated by him because he didn't really say what you could do about it. So he didn't have any practical advice. But then my wife gave me a book. She was hearing me talk about all this stuff, and she gave me a book by a psychiatrist here in New York City, where you and I are talking. And his name is Dr. Mark Epstein, and he has written these books about the overlap between psychiatry or psychology and Buddhism. And the upshot there is that the Buddha recommended meditation. At first, I thought I definitely don't want to do that. My parents were also ex-hippies and forced me to do yoga, and I just had a real allergy.
I'm like, what was your aversion?
I just thought it was cheesy and new age nonsense. And like I put it in the same category as like hacky sacks and aura readings. Just not
You sound like my husband.
Me.
Great. Okay.
At all. I was just not interested. And I'm probably like your husband in that I'm very skeptical, I imagine, and like outcome oriented, business oriented. And so I just didn't see the point of folding myself into a pretzel and communing with the cosmos. That was not. But the fact is, it was all ignorance. I didn't actually know what meditation was. What helped me there was that I saw the evidence that meditation, there's a ton of science to show that it can rewire key parts of the brain. It can help with anxiety and depression. It can improve the way you show up in the world. It's really, really helpful. And it doesn't require becoming a Buddhist or joining a group or wearing special outfits or anything like that. It's really simple, secular, scientifically validated exercise for your brain. And that got me really interested. It also gave me an entrepreneurial sense so this is around 2008, 2009, several years after the panic attacks. And I realized, I'm reading all of these books about meditation. Nobody that I know or have read about seems to have been able to talk about this without being intensely annoying. So maybe I could, I know how to communicate. That's my job. So maybe I could do it. And so that was where I got the idea to write a book.
I'm curious how you talk to people. How do you get people kind of over the line to realize there is a voice in your head and it is not you?
There is this voice that chases us out of bed in the morning and is just yammering at us all day long. We're like wanting stuff, not wanting stuff, judging people, judging ourselves, comparing ourselves to other people, thinking about the past or the future instead of focusing on what's happening right now. I think most people can relate to the fact that we have this nonstop inner conversation. And my point is, when you're unaware of it, it owns you. You have this thought, maybe I should say something that will ruin the next 48 hours of my marriage. And then you just fucking do it,
Right.
And so what I'm saying is what meditation allows you to do is to get some visibility into all of the chaos and cacophony in your mind so that you're not so owned by it. And that is just incredibly helpful. You're not so reactive in situations. You're not so yanked around by every impulse that comes up in your head. It gives you a kind of freedom so that you can respond wisely to things instead of reacting blindly.
That's it. Yeah. I always think of like reacting versus responding.
Yes.
And I ask everybody this because I think it's so important to just remind everyone you're human. You still have these moments, yes, where you're reacting?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. One of my little lines that I sometimes say is some people teach from the mountaintop and I teach from the fetal position. Like my job is really just that I make a lot of mistakes. If there's anything that makes me unusual, it's just that I'm willing to talk about my stuff, not because I'm so interested in talking about myself, but because it's just a great way to illustrate, okay, here's me being a dum-dum. Here's what I did about it. And then so you can see, here's how the tools work. And if that guy can do it, so can I.
People love to follow someone. So I wonder if your vulnerability is what makes you successful in the work you're doing.
I honestly think I would be more successful if I pretended to have all the answers. I look around at the folks who are like crushing it in my line of work. And not to say that they don't have any humility, but they're much closer to teaching from the mountaintop than I am. There really is, as you just articulated, a real human desire to have somebody on a pedestal.
He's up here. He's made it.
Yes.
I don't have to feel the way I feel now because I can see someone who's done that.
I just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's just,
not you.
In my case, it would be just lying.
Yeah. So then that's the antithesis of this whole, of all the work.
Yes.
So I want to ask you and switch gears a little bit into Irrational Hope because we're talking about meditation. And one of the things I'm trying to support people in doing is cultivating hope even when the odds say everything to the contrary. You should not be hopeful right now, which I do think is some of the backdrop of what we're seeing. I mean, if you turn on any news station, you generally aren't seeing things that are positive, and you're also seeing so many different fires that feel like they're burning. So there is this, I think, sense of a lack of agency. How does meditation support this idea of irrational hope in your mind?
I would say the number one message of meditation for me is that the brain and the mind are trainable. That happiness is not an unalterable factory setting. It's a skill that you can train. It's a set of skills. And what is more hopeful than that? My old job was to travel the world to find the shittiest news, cover it, and deliver it to you. My new job is to travel around the world and deliver this piece of news, which is like, if there's salvation on offer for our species, it's in this direction, that change genuinely is possible. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's a unbroken hockey stick trajectory, up and to the right, that you'll never have any setbacks. But messy marginal improvement over time is a real thing. And so I'll just repeat that's hope.
That you can change your own brain.
Yes. And it matters.
Why?
We live in a world where, despite the fact that everything about modern life is telling us that the individual is the most important thing, millennia of evolution are telling us that actually we're social animals. We need each other to survive. And so one of the reasons why we're so unhappy right now is because technology and hyper-individualism and hyper-productivity and optimization just drive us deeper and deeper into our own heads, and we're not getting the social support we need. So that is, I believe, one of the major contributors to the literally unprecedented levels of anxiety, depression, suicide, addiction, and loneliness. And so when you work on yourself, it inevitably ripples out to the world. Is it going to single-handedly change everything? Is it going to fix all the garbage in your newsfeed? No. But it still matters. And when you feel like you're having an impact in the world, that makes you more resilient to all the nonsense you're seeing in your newsfeed. And it gives you a sense of empowerment. It's ennobling. It matters.
I had never really thought about actually until this moment, but because of the way you just talked about meditation is one of the benefits of it for me was actually just cultivating or creating a real relationship with myself.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that meant. I never had a relationship with myself. And I was generally not super comfortable spending a lot of time alone. So I was always busy. I always had plans. I was traveling. Everything. And the biggest forcing function was actually lockdown. I was in New York City, COVID, by myself, and I was scared shitless. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be by myself. I live alone. Most of my friends have left now, and I'm here with my dog. And it was actually one of the best experiences of my life. It allowed me the space to trust that I could create a relationship with myself of my own understanding, through, meditation, through journaling, through contemplative practices, through reading a whole heck of a lot, studying secular Buddhism is one of my favorite podcasts, and thinking about how I could then obviously share this with people. So I want to call that out, and I'm wondering what that was like for you, but there's something so meaningful about a relationship with the self, and then a recognition of the roles you play in other people's lives and your own life. And then I think that a lot of that ties to a sense of mattering.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you matter, that can change, again, the course of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, it just goes back to what I was saying before, that meditation or any other personal development, all the things you just listed about journaling and contemplative practice, et cetera, it's not self-indulgent. It's going to show up in your relationships. And just as anxiety and anger are really contagious, so is calm, well-being, empathy, compassion. You can be a node of sanity in an insane world. And that's important. And that's hope.
For somebody today who's going, I'm already overwhelmed. I'm sitting in overwhelm. You're telling me to meditate. And what I'm sure you can also tell people, and I can tell people, is your meditation practice will not change your life in one day.
Am I saying sit and meditate and it's going to fix everything? Absolutely not. We have to, what F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold competing ideas in our mind and still be able to function. And so at least two things are true right now. One is there are some really bad things happening in the world. I'm not trying to gaslight you and say that's not true, but how do you want to be in the face of that? Is your distress helping? I don't think it is. And I'm not saying you should feel bad about your distress. What I am saying is I don't think you need to perform anger or sorrow because it's what you feel meets the moment. I don't think that helps.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that taking care of yourself in an environment like this is not self-indulgence. It does matter. This is the power we have. The power we have is to have agency in our own orbit, which ripples out in incalculable ways that we can never know. And so all you can do is everything you can do. And so taking care of yourself is part of that. I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not telling you it's going to solve everything. And I'm not trying to tell you that the problems you're seeing in the world, economic inequality, war, injustice, polarization, I'm trying to tell you that those things aren't true. What I'm saying is what's the best way to deal with it?
Yeah.
Fortify yourself so that you can be a constructive player. This is another quote, and I can't remember who it's from, but like something to the effect of, we want to engage joyfully in the sorrows of the world. So that's a paradox. But joy is a responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's not trivial. So taking care of yourself, experiencing joy helps you. That's not denial. I'm not recommending that. It helps you then have the resources to turn around and do whatever's within your power to do.
We'll be right back with Dan Harris. And we're back with Dan Harris. What are some things in your more recent history that have been shifted positively because of meditation?
Well, I'll say, so the type of meditation that most people start with is mindfulness meditation, which is very simply sit, try to focus on one thing. Usually it's your breath. And then every time you get distracted, you start again and again and again. And the most important thing to know here is that getting distracted is not a failure. It's actually success. Why? Because every time you get distracted and you wake up from it, you're seeing how wild the mind is, which allows you over time not to be so owned by it. Right. That's mindfulness, the self-awareness that allows you to see what's happening behind your eyes, between your ears, without being yanked around by it. So that's what most people start with. If you take it all the way back to the time of the Buddha, who invented these practices, he also taught something called loving kindness, which is, for me, I'm going to channel your husband here, at least at first, incredibly annoying. It's like Valentine's Day with a gun to your head. You are like sitting.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's crazy. You're sitting. The instruction is to sit, close your eyes, envision a series of beings, like people and animals. You know, you start with an easy person, then you do yourself, then you do a mentor, then a neutral person, somebody you see all the time and tend to overlook, then a difficult person, and then everybody everywhere. And then you send, as you're working your way through the sequence, you're sending phrases like maybe happy, healthy, whatever. So it's like really saccharine. And the research shows that it has physiological effects, psychological effects, and behavioral effects. Little kids who are taught this practice, preschoolers, are then more likely to give their stickers away to kids they don't like.
Oh,
so it's really incredible stuff. And it doesn't make you a doormat, just in case anybody's feeling skeptical hearing this. It's not about dropping your boundaries. And I'm not saying that we need to co-sign on or give a hug to the people who we think are doing damaging things in the world. I think we can resist without the anger, without the rage, because it's not helping.
Well, and it's poison to you.
Poison to you. It's reducing your capacity to access the full brilliance of the human brain. So if you can take the rage out of it, you become more effective in doing whatever you decide to do to help the world. So that practice, loving kindness, has had a huge effect on me because my factory settings are frosty New Englander. Like I'm not the warmest guy by nature, but it's given me just much more access to basic like friendliness.
Yeah.
In fact, the word, the ancient word that we now translate as loving kindness, the ancient word is metta, M-E-T-T-A. The better translation for that word is actually friendliness. It's just like you're just more of a homie. You're more of a I'm using that word because I got some feedback in a 360 review several years ago. Dan's not a homie, and because I was so like productivity obsessed and
Get
so
things done.
now I'm much like I still get stuff done, but I make much more time to see my friends, to be with my family, and by the way, that makes me better at my job.
I'm curious when you think about the loving kindness piece. I want to know how this work has impacted your relationships, your personal relationships. Because I heard you talk about your relationship with your wife, like your children. I mean, how is that impacted?
Huge. So the mindfulness piece, the mindfulness meditation, where again you sit, try to focus on something like the breath, and then you notice you've gotten distracted, you start again and again. That's really helpful for lowering your emotional reactivity, not being owned by every little impulse or thought that pops through your head. So that really helps with my wife and son immensely, where it just couples so beautifully with the loving kindness stuff, because that just kind of boosts your overall warmth quotient, both vis-a-vis other people and vis-a-vis your own mind. So there's this thing that many humans do where you notice, oh, I've just had a really greedy or selfish thought, or I've just had a really judgmental thought. And then you very quickly tell yourself a story about what kind of person you are because you had that thought, as if you invited the thought somehow. Like, but we don't know where thoughts come from.
You created it. It's because it's your character. And only you are the kind of person.
So having that warmth in your own mind allows you to see all of your stuff, your demons, as it were, without being so coiled up around it and so filled with shame. Shame is
that's what I was going to ask you about next.
Shame is I call it like the psychic constipation. Like nothing moves through. You lock down in this story of what kind of person you are, and that actually shuts out other people. So you're less available to repair your relationships, to apologize, to learn from it, because you're just stuck. And so that's why this combination, and there are other tools as well, but this combination of mindfulness and loving kindness, you just change the way you relate to your mind. I would add in there a related tool, which is self-compassion, which is just the ability to literally talk to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend. I just find this so interesting. There's a ton of research around learning to talk to yourself differently. Just rewiring your inner dialogue. And, it's not complicated. Just next time you notice you're beating yourself up or stressed or anxious, pause. This is going to make it even more cheesy, but you put your hand on your heart. A lot of research to show that can change the way the nervous system is operating in the moment. And then just talk to yourself the way, if you had a friend or a child right in front of you who is struggling in a similar way, what would you say to them? You say that to yourself. It really helps to use your own name. This is called distanced self-talk. And again, this is all research. Doing that, and again, with a backdrop of mindfulness and loving kindness, has had a huge impact on just how I relate to myself and then how I relate to the world. And because my relationships with other people, and we know this too from the data, because our relationships are the most important variable in our flourishing and thriving, I then get happier, and then my relationships improve even further. That's the upward spiral.
You take yourself up.
Yes.
Upward spiral.
Yeah.
I want to talk about shame for a second, because I do think there are a lot of components to getting through or managing shame. But first and foremost, I want to just clearly have you say, like, what does it mean to be in shame, right? Because there's a difference between shame and embarrassment, humiliation.
The way I understand it is shame is really you stuck in your own story. You're telling yourself a story about who you are. There's a difference between shame and what some Buddhist teachers call wise remorse. So wise remorse is like, I did something wrong. Let me think about what may have contributed to that and let me make amends. Shame is where you tell yourself a story about how awful you are. And this is something I've done many, many times. And I can still go there in the right circumstances. There's no room left for other people. There's no room to learn. You're just locked down into this very self-centered state, really. So I've really tried to move myself out of that into the wise remorse zone. And what for me gets me there is the self-compassion part.
Hmm.
So one way to think about this is what happens in your mind, the uncharitable thoughts, the selfish thoughts, they're not your fault. We don't know where they come from,
Right.
but they are your responsibility.
Yeah.
And so can you have some grace internally towards yourself based on whatever thought crimes you've committed or whatever
Thought crimes, yes.
actual crimes you've committed out in the
Yeah,
world?
this is not Minority Report.
Yes. Well, we treat our inner atmosphere really is like Minority Report,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
We haven't even done anything, but
punished.
some thought comes up and then you're in shame.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not saying you don't hold yourself responsible. One way to think about it is switching from having an inner drill sergeant to an inner coach.
Mm-hmm.
A coach doesn't let you off the hook, doesn't fail to point out when you've done something, unskillful. They're just not a jerk about it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like for your inner atmosphere.
One of the things that I started doing as far as dealing with my own anxiety, because it got worse in my first pregnancy, is recognizing that I could also put distance between me and my thoughts by giving my thoughts a name.
Yes.
And so the name's Carla, which I've talked about on the show a good amount. And if I can label that, I can separate the me that I know me to be from that.
Yeah. What you're describing with giving one aspect of your mind a name, there's a really rich history for this. The Buddha, 2,600 years ago, had a name for his inner avatar of greed and delusion. He called him Mara. In the Hindu or Vedic tradition, they use the term avatars to describe different aspects of our mind. And then more recently, there's a whole school of psychology called internal family systems where you name your so-called parts. So I've done this too. I have two parts, or I sometimes use the term demons, that I wrestle with. One is my sort of greedy hustler part, I named after my great-grandfather who was a crook. And seriously, total
What's his
crook.
name?
Arthur.
Arthur. Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
total crook. And then I have a very sort of angry part that I named after my grandfather, who was quite an angry man. And so this is a great way to create some distance from these neurotic patterns that we have in our mind, and then you can relate to them differently. You can be in conversation with them. And what's important is to see that Carla is trying to help you.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time feeling either shame or aversion towards the difficult aspects of our personality. But what was important for me to learn is that actually warmth, that's the ultimate disarmament, where you can see, oh yeah, Carla's trying to help me. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you. Yeah.
But I'm going to move in a different direction.
Yeah.
And you can run that play over and over.
And you kind of have to.
You absolutely have to.
Yeah, that was the only way I could get.
Yes.
Now it's an automatic response, but at first it was just like, all right. I don't have to spiral about this thought all day and worry about it. I can just go, oh, there's Carla again.
Yes.
And to identify the amount of times that she comes up in different scenarios. I mean, I just a few weeks ago realized that there was a scenario that it was coming up with that I hadn't even identified as an intrusive thought. It was about career. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, like this thing that I've thought was just a normal Leah thought is not mine at all.
Oh, they're sneaky little fuckers.
Exactly.
It really is
exactly.
true. It's crazy. And I just want to come back to your overarching theme here, which is hope. Like this is all hopeful.
Yes.
The mind is super gnarly at times and the world is crazy, but there are these tools that are time-tested and scientifically validated that can allow you to navigate it all in a much more supple and sophisticated and smooth way. That's really good news.
Yeah. There are ways to work with ourselves. And the reason I think shame is really important to talk about in this context is, as we've already said, meditation can actually support part of that process of experiencing shame, but also in the context of irrational hope as it relates to how we relate to ourselves and then to others, shame is one of the worst things can feel because you are contagious.
Shuts you down too.
It shuts you down, and the things you say when you're in shame, the things I say when I'm in shame to my husband or to other people, or the things I don't say because I shut myself off and I'm like silent treatment, are things I wish I could honestly take back. I mean, if I'm being honest, it's like there are things I wish I could take back. And then I only later have gone, oh, I was in shame.
100% same thing for me. Everything you just said, I completely relate to it. Just going to mention one other little cognitive reframe that was really helpful for me. There's a wonderful professor at NYU named Dolly Chugg who's become a friend, and she has this concept called goodishness or goodish. Many of us really, really want to believe we're good people. And we are. But we're capable of being schmucks in any number of ways. And so the problem is when we're confronted with our bad behavior, we're clinging so hard to this concept of being a good person that's when we go into shame or shut down or overwhelm. But if you tell yourself instead the story that you're goodish, well, then when you make a mistake, that it's not a threat to your identity. It's like, yeah, I'm goodish. Of course I'm going to make a mistake. It's a growth mindset that allows you to continue to learn.
That takes me to what you said about holding two things at once, two competing thoughts, which I think is honestly part of the challenge of a lot of what's going on in the world right now is we have a very difficult time living in the gray and holding complex ideas versus a binary of either you're good or you're bad, you're in or you're out, you're this or you're that. And the truth is none of us are any of those things.
Yes.
And that, I think, is what creates so much of the challenge in our world is the inability to say, I am many things.
Yes.
We are many things.
Yes.
I might have one label, but the list of things that define that label are completely different than yours. Or maybe we only have 5 things in common. And everything else is related to my own experience, to the way I see the world, to the way my own set of, neurons fire up here and my own desires. I mean, all of the things that color our life experience are what make us who we are. And so without wanting to become totally individualistic in what I'm saying, I do think it's important to recognize that we can be social. We can be people who support each other. We can do all the things that we've done, but we can't do that if we're not allowing ourselves and each other to exist in this complexity.
I think we need to really think hard about these algorithms that are driving so many aspects of our lives. You were talking earlier about how we're supposed to feel any hope in a world where there's so many awful things happening. Yes, there are awful things happening, but the algorithms are operating for profit by exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities. They're making a ton of money keeping us angry and afraid. Why? Because it keeps us scrolling.
Yeah.
And so the world that you see on your phone is distorted. I'm not saying it's all untrue. The bad things you're seeing are true.
Right.
There's a ton of other shit that is also true
right.
that we're not focusing on. And so we have this negativity bias, which made sense in an evolutionary context because we wanted to be looking out for threats. But this is what the algos are exploiting and getting us to forget that if you put down the phone and look around, all around you, people are building buildings, raising children, holding the door open for each other, doing tiny acts of kindness. Like all that is also true. And if you forget that, you go into despair. And by the way, you also start thinking that the people with whom you disagree, the people on the quote unquote other side of the aisle, you're getting this cartoon version of them.
Yes.
Stripped of any nuance. And that's, by the way, what they're getting of us. And all of this is fueled by social media and by the news media, which I was a part of for so long. So I'm not saying all social media is bad, and I'm not saying all news media is bad. I'm just saying we need to be informed consumers.
Correct.
Because getting too wrapped up in it is making us miserable.
And we're the product even. It's like we have become the product.
Yes.
What is the most exciting thing that you want to share in 2026?
I just think it's so incredibly hopeful. This insight that's animated my whole second career, which is that happiness is a skill, that the brain and the mind are trainable. That's such good news. And I just don't want people to overlook that. Anytime you're feeling hopeless, helpless, just remember that that's not true. Like you have agency to not to fix everything, but to make meaningful marginal change in your own mind, which will help you make meaningful change in the world.
That's it. Yeah, I love that. That sums up why I do this show, actually.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So if you can do that, then you can change your own corner of the world.
Yes.
And you never know. It's like You may feel that you're only impacting one person, but you don't know what that one person is going to go out in the world and
Yes.
do or be.
Exactly.
And same when you're not in a good spot.
Yes.
Is like you go into the coffee shop and you're rude. You don't know what that means for that person that just got your energy and is now going to transfer it to themselves and to someone else.
1,000,000%.
Yeah. I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me, Dan.
Okay.
Better humans are.
Better to be around.
Nice. I've never heard anyone say that. Nice. It's been 8 years. Wow. All right. Better work is. No pressure. No pressure.
What we should all be striving for.
And a better world has.
A real possibility of happening.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Love that. That clicked. That took a second and it clicked. It does. And in this theme of irrational hope, I really hope it does.
Yeah.
That was Dan Harris, meditation and mindfulness advocate and teacher, and author of the best-selling book 10% Happier, also the name of his podcast. And that is a wrap for our January series, The Year for Irrational Hope. I had a lot of fun taping these episodes because I got to meet or see again people who've had a very real impact on my life, and I got to share them with you because I know they can have an impact on yours. This series came about because it felt very true to me in this moment to skip sort of the bland New Year's resolutions and instead share stories, ideas, and tools to help you meet this really unique moment with more openness and more hope. And that is what I hope you're walking away with today. If you liked this episode with Dan Harris and you haven't listened to the others in the series, make sure you head back and check them out. We've got one with Bruce Feiler, another with Debbie Millman, and finally with Gabby Bernstein. And I'm going to promise you will leave those conversations feeling re-energized, more awake to the possibility of your own life and the compounding effect your purpose, your awareness, and your joy can have on every single person you come across. All right, so I'll see you next week for our final episode before the hiatus. And until then, happy meditating. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Rachel Long and Ava Ahmadbegi. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Boland mixed our show. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Mujib Merdad. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is LinkedIn's editor-in-chief and vice president of content development. And I'm Leah Smart. As always, thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.